Ambassador Quill Thrak stepped off his crystalline shuttle with all the pomp and circumstance of a tax collector delivering a foreclosure notice. The 8-foot-tall, purple-scaled diplomat adjusted his ceremonial sash and practiced his most intimidating sneer, which honestly looked more like he'd eaten some questionable space food. Admiral Buck Morrison watched the aliens' theatrical entrance from the observation deck of Luna Station and sighed. "Jenny, please tell me this clown isn't here to deliver another one of their strongly worded letters." Diplomat Jenny Walsh, known throughout the Terran Empire for her ability to insult someone in 17 different languages while smiling sweetly, examined her fingernails with practiced boredom. "Oh no, Buck. This time it's different. This time they're really serious." She paused for dramatic effect. "They brought the fancy shuttle." Professor Grimsby, the nervous scientist who'd somehow ended up in charge of xenobiology despite preferring his aliens dead and dissected, wrung his hands anxiously. But what if they actually mean it this time? What if they really do have 10,000 ships ready to turn Earth into cosmic dust? Morrison chuckled and straightened his uniform. A career military man who'd survived 3 alien conflicts and 2 congressional hearings, he'd learned that the key to dealing with galactic politics was treating it like a particularly absurd dinner theater. Grimsby, relax. If they wanted us dead, we'd already be dead. The fact that they keep sending ambassadors instead of antimatter torpedoes tells us everything we need to know. The meeting room filled with the usual suspects, military brass trying to look important, politicians trying to look concerned, and scientists trying to look invisible. Quill Thrak entered with his retinue of equally pompous alien bureaucrats, each one apparently competing for the title of most ridiculous hat. Citizens of the primitive world known as Earth. Quill Thrak began, his translator making him sound like a particularly dramatic Shakespeare actor with a head cold. "I bring the final ultimatum of the Galactic Council. You have 48 standard hours to surrender your pathetic empire and submit to proper galactic authority, or face total annihilation." "Mayu Maramson." Jenny Walsh raised her hand politely. "Quick question, Quilly. When you say total annihilation, do you mean like really total? Because last time you guys said that, you just blew up a couple of asteroids and called it a day." The ambassador's scales shifted to a deeper shade of purple, which apparently indicated either anger or embarrassment. Hard to tell with aliens. "This time is different, human. We have assembled the largest fleet in galactic history. 10,000 warships surround your insignificant planet as we speak." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. 10,000. That's impressive. Really shows you guys are taking this seriously. He paused. Of course, it also shows you think you need 10,000 ships to handle one little backwater planet. Makes a guy wonder what you're so worried about. The room fell silent except for the soft humming of life support systems and Professor Grimsby's nervous breathing. Quill Thrak's entourage shifted uncomfortably, their various appendages twitching in ways that suggested they hadn't expected this level of casual dismissal. "Your response is required within 48 hours, the ambassador repeated, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "Choose wisely, humans. The Council's patience has limits." As the alien delegation filed out with significantly less swagger than they'd entered with, Morrison turned to his team. "Well, folks, looks like we've got ourselves a deadline. Jenny, draft our response. Professor, start calculating orbital trajectories. And someone get me a cup of coffee. It's going to be a long 48 hours. 300 light-years away, in the magnificent crystal spires of the Galactic Council headquarters, Chairman Vex Tora lounged in his platinum-plated command throne like a cat who'd just cornered a particularly fat mouse. The amphibious leader's gills fluttered with satisfaction as he reviewed the holographic displays showing Earth's pathetic defenses. "Gentle beings," he announced to the assembled representatives of 47 galactic civilizations, "today marks the end of humanity's brief and irritating chapter in galactic history." General Scardoon, a massive insectoid warrior whose idea of diplomacy involved choosing which limb to tear off first, clicked his mandibles approvingly. "About time, Chairman." These humans have been nothing but trouble since they crawled out of their gravity well. Do you know they actually had the audacity to establish colonies without filing the proper paperwork? The council chamber erupted in scandalized chittering, gurgling, and whatever noise the crystalline beings made when they were particularly offended. Clearly, improper paperwork was the highest form of galactic blasphemy. Ambassador Fleb Gorth, representing the overly bureaucratic Zephyrian Empire, waved his tentacles dramatically. The humans have violated 17 different galactic regulations, including but not limited to unauthorized terraforming, failure to submit cultural assessment reports, and the completely barbaric practice of seasoning their food with actual flavor. Disgusting, muttered several council members in various alien languages. Vex Torah brought the chamber to order with a sound that was part gavel, part mating call. The question before us is not whether humanity deserves extinction. That was settled when they invented something called pineapple pizza. The question is how quickly we can accomplish this necessary cleansing. General Scardoon's compound eyes gleamed with predatory satisfaction. Our fleet consists of 10,000 warships from every major civilization. Each vessel represents the pinnacle of military technology. We have planet crackers, star destroyers, and weapons that can unmake matter at the subatomic level. Against this force, humanity's primitive chemical rockets and metal projectiles are about as threatening as a child's slingshot. The War Council's strategic computer, a massive AI collective that had been calculating optimal attack patterns for the past 6 months, projected its analysis into the center of the chamber. The holographic Earth hung suspended like a blue marble, surrounded by a swarm of red dots representing the Council fleet. Estimated resistance duration, 4.7 standard hours. The computer announced in its emotionless mechanical voice. Probability of human victory, 0.003%, with a margin of error of 0.003%. In other words, Vex Torah chuckled, mathematically impossible. Perfect. Yeah. Ambassador Crix Tal of the Quantum Confederation raised what might have been a hand if quantum beings had consistent physical forms. What of their allies? Surely some civilizations will object to this aggressive approach to diplomacy. General Scardoon's laughter sounded like a garbage disposal eating a piccolo. What allies? The humans have spent their brief galactic career insulting everyone they've met. The Regellians are still angry about that trade dispute over coffee beans. The Andromedans haven't forgotten the Christmas incident of 2387. And don't get me started on what the humans did to the Centaurian peace gardens. They turned them into a barbecue pit, Fleb Gorth added helpfully, with actual fire. Who does that? The chamber filled with the alien equivalent of murmurs of agreement, which sounded like a cosmic blender set to apocalypse. Vex Torah stood, his ceremonial robes flowing dramatically in the artificial gravity field. Gentle beings, in less than 48 standard hours, the human problem will be solved permanently. Their silence in response to our ultimatum only confirms what we've always known. They are a primitive species that recognizes superior force when they see it. And after we've dealt with Earth? Asked Ambassador Yith Mara of the Void Collective, her shadows writhing with anticipation. Then we divide their territories among the council members, catalog their resources, and file the appropriate extinction reports in quintuplicate, Vex Torah replied, as is proper and civilized. The entire council rose in salute, their various forms of applause creating a cacophony that would have sent human composers into fits of creative ecstasy or nervous breakdowns. None of them noticed the small human listening device that had been quietly recording every word from its hiding spot behind the ceremonial urn of eternal bureaucracy. Some things, after all, were worth violating a few more galactic regulations to accomplish. Back on Luna Station, Admiral Morrison stood before a holographic display that would have made the Galactic Council's strategic computer weep with envy, if strategic computers were capable of weeping, which they weren't. Probably. All right, people, Morrison announced to his assembled staff, time for a little show and tell. Jenny, status report on our diplomatic response. Jenny Walsh looked up from her tablet with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just finished writing the perfect resignation letter. Our official response to the Galactic Council's ultimatum consists of exactly 0 words, delivered with maximum possible attitude. Radio silence, communication blackout, the full diplomatic cold shoulder. They want to interpret our silence as fear and submission, and we're happy to let them. Chief Engineer Tank Rodriguez, a man whose nickname came from both his build and his tendency to solve problems with overwhelming firepower, cracked his knuckles loudly. While they're congratulating themselves on our surrender, we've been implementing Operation Surprise Party. And let me tell you, Admiral, this is going to be one hell of a surprise. Communications Officer Pip Hawkins, whose youthful appearance belied her ability to coordinate military communications across half the galaxy simultaneously, pulled up a series of tactical displays. The Council fleet is positioned exactly where our deep space reconnaissance predicted. 10,000 ships in a standard siege formation, completely surrounding Earth. They're so confident they haven't even bothered with proper sensor sweeps. Morrison nodded approvingly. Overconfidence, the galaxy's most renewable resource. Professor Grimsby, how are our guests settling in? Professor Grimsby had traded his nervous energy for the focused intensity of a man who'd found his purpose in life. It turned out that purpose involved weaponizing scientific principles in ways that violated several laws of physics and probably a few laws of common decency. The cloaked research stations are maintaining perfect stealth protocols, Grimsby reported, consulting his datapad. 47 installations positioned throughout the system, each one invisible to Council sensors. Our gravity manipulation experiments have exceeded all expectations, and the quantum disruption field generators are online and ready. Tank Rodriguez grinned with the enthusiasm of someone about to break something expensive. Don't forget the best part, Professor. Tell the Admiral about the Dimensional Pocket Project. Grimsby's nervous twitch had been replaced by what could only be described as a mad scientist's gleam. We've successfully created 17 stable dimensional pockets, each containing a fully operational battle fleet. The Terran Imperial Navy's actual strength isn't the 300 ships the Council thinks we have. It's closer to, well, let's just say significantly more than that. How significantly more? Morrison asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer would be entertaining. Approximately 15,000 frontline warships, Admiral, plus support vessels, orbital defense platforms, and a few experimental weapons that our ethics committee is still arguing about. Jenny Walsh looked up from her diplomatic reports with mock concern. Ethics committee? We have one of those? We did until yesterday, Pip Hawkins replied cheerfully. They submitted their resignation en masse after reviewing the specifications for Project Cosmic Irony. Something about crimes against the very concept of proportional response. Morrison chuckled. Can't say I blame them. Tank, status on our defensive preparations? Every orbital platform is armed and ready, Admiral. We've got antimatter torpedo batteries, plasma cannon arrays, and those new reality distortion weapons the RD boys cooked up after too much coffee and not enough sleep. Plus the asteroid belt mining operations have been repurposed. Repurposed how? Let's just say that what the Council thinks are harmless space rocks are actually the largest minefield in recorded galactic history. Each asteroid has been hollowed out and packed with enough explosives to crack a moon. Pip Hawkins pulled up a chronometer display. 36 hours until the Council's deadline, Admiral. They're expecting either complete surrender or token resistance. They're not expecting a comprehensive demonstration of why humanity earned the nickname those crazy bastards from every other species we've met, Morrison finished. The beautiful thing about being underestimated is that you only get to surprise people once. We might as well make it count. Jenny Walsh closed her tablet with a satisfied snap. I've prepared our post-victory diplomatic statements. Fair warning, I may have been slightly sarcastic. How sarcastic? I used the phrase galactic embarrassment 14 times in the first paragraph. Morrison looked around at his team, a sarcastic diplomat, a mad scientist, an engineer who treated explosions as a form of artistic expression, and a communications officer who could coordinate fleet movements like a cosmic conductor. Not exactly what the military academies had in mind when they designed command structures, but somehow perfectly suited for dealing with an overconfident galactic empire. All right, people. T-minus 36 hours until we find out if our silence was golden or just gold-plated. Let's make sure the Galactic Council remembers this conversation for the next few centuries. The Galactic Council's Grand Armada approached Earth with all the subtlety of a cosmic parade and roughly the same level of organization. 10,000 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the self-satisfaction of a military force that had never encountered serious opposition. General Scardoon commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Inevitable Destiny, a vessel whose name apparently reflected the Galactic Council's approach to both military strategy and creative writing. The massive dreadnought's bridge bustled with activity as dozens of alien officers prepared for what they assumed would be the shortest military campaign in galactic history. Admiral Queshtar, status report on human defensive positions, Scardoon clicked out in his species' rapid-fire battle language. Admiral Queshtar, a crystalline being whose body reflected light in patterns that indicated smugness, consulted his tactical displays. Minimal resistance detected, General. Approximately 300 human vessels, mostly concentrated around their orbital facilities. Their planetary defense grid appears to consist of primitive missile launchers and energy weapons that wouldn't threaten a cargo hauler. Pathetic, Scardoon mandible clicked dismissively. Open a communication channel to the human home world. Let's give them one final chance to surrender before we demonstrate the futility of resistance. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Morrison sitting calmly in his command chair, looking for all the world like a man who'd just been told his lottery numbers had come up. Behind him, the Luna Station Command Center hummed with quiet efficiency. General Scardoon, Morrison said pleasantly, I see you've brought some friends, 10,000 ships, if our sensors are accurate. That's quite an impressive display. It is your final warning, human, Scardoon replied, his translator giving his words the ominous weight of cosmic judgment. Surrender now, and your species will be granted the mercy of quick extinction. Resist, and we will make your destruction a lesson for any other primitive species that might consider defying galactic authority. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. That's a generous offer, General. Really shows the Council's commitment to proper customer service. But I'm afraid we're going to have to decline. Then you have chosen death. Well, Morrison replied, glancing at his tactical display with the casual interest of someone checking the weather, we've chosen something. Whether it's death remains to be seen. Pip, are we ready to begin the demonstration? All systems green, Admiral, came Pip Hawkins' voice from off-screen. Operation Surprise Party is a go. Scardoon's compound eyes narrowed. Something about the human's tone suggested this wasn't going according to script. What demonstration? What are you talking about? Morrison smiled with the gentle patience of a teacher about to deliver a particularly educational lesson. General, you've brought 10,000 ships to destroy 300. That seems like overkill, don't you think? We thought we'd level the playing field a bit. The space around Earth suddenly lit up like a cosmic Christmas tree as 17-dimensional pockets opened simultaneously, disgorging fleet after fleet of human warships. The 300 vessels the Council had detected suddenly became 3,000, then 5,000, then numbers that made the tactical computers start making distressed beeping sounds. Impossible, Queshtar's crystalline body flickered with patterns indicating extreme confusion. Our sensors detected no spatial anomalies, no fleet movements, no. His words were cut off as the asteroid belt erupted in a chain reaction of explosions that lit up half the solar system. What the Council had assumed were harmless space rocks revealed themselves to be the largest minefield in recorded galactic history. each detonation releasing enough energy to power a small planet. "Surprise," Morrison said mildly. Captain Rex Reckerstone's voice crackled over the comm system from his flagship, the excessive response. "Admiral, this is Wrecker. The Terran 7th Fleet is in position and ready to demonstrate why humanity has trust issues with galactic authority." "Proceed, Captain." The human fleet moved with precision that would have impressed the Council's military analysts if they hadn't been too busy trying to figure out how they'd miscalculated so spectacularly. Ships that should have been outclassed by Council technology began systematically dismantling the supposedly superior alien vessels with weapons that definitely hadn't been in any intelligence reports. "General," one of Scardoon's tactical officers reported in a voice that had climbed several octaves, "we're reading massive energy signatures from the human vessels. Their weapons are registering power levels that exceed our maximum theoretical calculations." "That's impossible. Our intelligence indicated primitive chemical propulsion and metal projectiles." Admiral Morrison's image on the screen shrugged apologetically. "Well, General, that's what happens when your intelligence comes from observing our civilian shipping lanes and tourist vessels. Did you really think we'd put our best toys where everyone could see them?" The Council fleet, which had approached Earth expecting a quick extermination mission, suddenly found itself engaged in the kind of space battle that would be studied in military academies for centuries to come. Human ships darted between the larger alien vessels like angry wasps, their advanced weaponry tearing through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. "Retreat," Scardoon finally commanded, his voice carrying the kind of panic that only comes from realizing you've brought a knife to a nuclear war. "All ships, tactical withdrawal. Reform at safe distance." "I'm afraid that's not going to be possible," Morrison replied conversationally. "You see, we've taken the liberty of establishing a perimeter around the entire system. No one leaves until we've finished our little chat." As if to emphasize his point, several Council ships that had attempted to flee found their escape routes blocked by previously invisible orbital defense platforms that began methodically reducing the retreat vessels to cosmic debris. "This ends now, human," Scardoon roared. Morrison's smile never wavered. "Oh, General, we're just getting started." What followed could only be described as a masterclass in applied violence with a minor in cosmic humiliation. The Galactic Council's Grand Armada, which had entered the Sol system expecting to file a routine extermination report, instead found itself starring in the kind of military disaster that would inspire epic poems in cultures that had very dark senses of humor. Captain Rex Reckerstone lived up to his nickname with enthusiasm that bordered on artistic passion. His flagship, the Excessive Response, led a coordinated assault that turned Council battle formations into abstract sculptures made of twisted metal and regret. "Admiral Morrison." Wrecker's voice came through the comm with the casual tone of someone discussing weekend plans, but the 7th Fleet has successfully demonstrated the effectiveness of our new plasma lance arrays. The Council's port flank has been, well, reduced to constituent atoms, might be putting it politely. From her position coordinating the defense grid, Pip Hawkins reported with the efficiency of someone who'd found her calling in life. "Sir, orbital platforms Echo through Romeo have achieved target lock on the Council's command vessels. Awaiting authorization to demonstrate why we named our antimatter torpedoes conversation enders." "Authorization granted. Fire at will." The space around Earth lit up with weapons fire that would have impressed the gods of war from every mythology humanity had ever invented. The Council's supposedly invincible dreadnoughts found themselves outgunned by human vessels a fraction of their size, their advanced shielding systems failing against weapons that operated on principles the galactic community hadn't even discovered yet. General Scardoon watched his fleet disintegrate with the growing horror of someone who'd just realized they'd accidentally challenged a galactic superpower to single combat. "This is impossible. Our technology is superior. Our ships are larger. Our weapons are more advanced." Admiral Morrison appeared on the screen again, his expression carrying the patient sympathy of someone explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow student. General, bigger doesn't always mean better. Sometimes it just means you present a larger target. And as for advanced technology, he paused to glance at a tactical display showing another wave of council ships being systematically dismantled. Well, let's just say that when your species was still figuring out interstellar travel, humanity was already asking the important questions. What questions? Questions like, how do we make things explode more efficiently? And what's the maximum amount of destructive force we can pack into the smallest possible space? You know, the really important scientific inquiries. Admiral Queshtar's crystalline form was flickering with patterns that indicated system overload. General, we've lost 60% of the fleet. The human vessels are employing tactical formations we've never encountered, using weapons that shouldn't exist, and their pilots are flying like they're actively seeking combat instead of avoiding it. That's because they are, Morrison replied helpfully. Human military doctrine is based on a simple principle: if something is shooting at you, shoot back harder. If something is bigger than you, find its weak spot and hit it repeatedly. If something claims to be invincible, test that hypothesis with extreme prejudice. The Council fleet, which had maintained perfect formation approaching Earth, was now scattered across the solar system in various stages of destruction. Ships that had been the pride of galactic navies were fleeing in terror from human vessels with names like diplomatic immunity, prior engagement, and we tried talking. Tank Rodriguez's voice came through the tactical network with the satisfaction of an engineer whose designs had exceeded all expectations. Admiral, the dimensional mines are performing beautifully. Every time a Council ship tries to jump to hyperspace, it finds itself in a pocket dimension filled with very angry human gunships. It's like the galaxy's most violent surprise party. Professor Grimsby, who had spent the battle coordinating the more exotic weapons systems, reported with scientific enthusiasm. Sir, the quantum disruption field is causing fascinating effects on the Council ship's navigation systems. They appear to be experiencing what can only be described as aggressive directional confusion. Meaning? Meaning? Meaning they're flying in circles while our ships pick them off like ducks in a barrel. It's quite elegant, really. Across the battlefield, Chairman Vex Torres' personal flagship, the Galactic Authority, found itself surrounded by a dozen human cruisers whose weapons were locked onto his ship's critical systems. The mighty chairman, who had presided over the Council's decision to exterminate humanity with such confident swagger, was now broadcasting on all frequencies. We surrender. We surrender. Ceasefire. Diplomatic immunity. Geneva Convention. Whatever protocols you have for prisoner treatment. Morrison's voice came back with amusement. Geneva Convention, Chairman? That's a human document. You might want to familiarize yourself with it, since you'll be operating under human authority for the foreseeable future. Human authority? Vex Torres' gills fluttered with panic. What do you mean? Well, Chairman, you brought 10,000 ships to our home system with the stated intention of committing genocide. Under human law, that's what we call an act of war. And since you've lost the war. Morrison paused dramatically. I think you can figure out the rest. The remnants of the Galactic Council fleet, those ships that hadn't been reduced to cosmic debris or quantum uncertainty, began broadcasting surrender signals on every frequency known to galactic civilization. The Grand Armada that had arrived to demonstrate galactic supremacy was now begging for mercy from the supposedly primitive species they'd come to exterminate. General Scardoon, Morrison said, his tone shifting to something resembling official business, you have exactly 1 standard hour to collect your surviving ships and prepare to receive boarding parties. We have some new terms and conditions to discuss. 6 months after what galactic historians would eventually call the Sol System incident, though human historians preferred the day we explained physics to the galaxy, Ambassador Quill Thrak found himself back on Luna Station. This time, however, he wasn't delivering ultimatums. He was begging. The same conference room that had hosted the Council's arrogant demands now served as the site of humanity's remarkably generous peace negotiations. Generous, of course, being a relative term when the alternative was complete annihilation. Admiral Morrison sat across from the thoroughly humbled alien diplomat, flanked by Jenny Walsh, who had somehow managed to make even her diplomatic smile look sarcastic. Professor Grimsby was there too, though these days he spent more time reviewing surrender documents than dissecting alien biology. Ambassador Morrison began with the tone of someone discussing a particularly favorable business deal. "I trust you've had time to review our terms?" Quilthrack's scales had faded to a pale purple that apparently indicated defeat, embarrassment, and possibly indigestion. "Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Council has carefully considered your proposals. While some members initially expressed concerns about the comprehensiveness of your requirements." "You mean they complained that we're basically dismantling their entire power structure and replacing it with something more reasonable?" Jenny Walsh interjected helpfully. "They have come to understand," Quilthrack continued, wincing slightly, "that the Terran Empire's approach to galactic governance may offer certain advantages over previous methods." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "Such as?" "Well, for instance, your requirement that all galactic conflicts be resolved through proper diplomatic channels before anyone is allowed to threaten genocide. That's surprisingly sensible." "We're full of surprises," Jenny replied dryly. "Wait until you see our proposals for standardized trade regulations and universal sentient rights." The ambassador's translator made a sound that suggested either confusion or mild panic. "Universal sentient rights?" Professor Grimsby looked up from his data pad with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found a new hobby in constitutional law. "It's a remarkable concept, Ambassador. The idea that all intelligent species have certain fundamental rights regardless of their technological level, cultural development, or taste in pizza toppings." Pizza toppings were specifically mentioned in the Terran Constitution? Article 7, Section 3, Morrison confirmed. Right after the bit about not committing genocide just because someone doesn't file their paperwork properly. Quilthrack consulted his own data pad, which contained what remained of the Galactic Council's negotiating position after 6 months of systematic diplomatic dismantling. "The Council has agreed to your terms regarding military disarmament, territorial redistribution, and the establishment of the new Galactic Assembly. However, they do have one small request." "Let me guess," Jenny said. "They want to know if they can keep some of their fancy titles and ceremonial uniforms." "Actually, Boris, they were hoping you might consider not requiring them to publicly apologize for the attempted genocide in 17 different languages during the galactic broadcast next week." Morrison exchanged glances with his team. After months of negotiations, the former Galactic Council had agreed to basically every demand humanity had made. The old empire had been dissolved, replaced by a democratic assembly where humanity held considerable influence. The massive military forces that had threatened Earth were now distributed among various species for peaceful purposes. And the bureaucratic nightmare that had characterized galactic government for millennia was being systematically replaced with something resembling common sense. "Ambassador," Morrison said finally, "the public apology stays. But we'll let them do it in their native languages instead of requiring them to learn human profanity." "That's surprisingly merciful." Jenny Walsh grinned with genuine amusement. "Don't get too excited, Quilly. We're still requiring them to establish diplomatic embassies on Earth, trade exclusively in human-regulated markets, and submit to annual inspections by Terran peacekeeping forces." "And the educational exchange programs," Professor Grimsby added. "Every major species needs to send their best students to human universities to learn proper scientific methodology. No more of this impossibly advanced technology nonsense without showing your work." Quilthrack's scales shifted to what might have been resignation or relief. "The Council accepts these terms. All of them. Unconditionally." Morrison stood and extended his hand, a gesture that still made most aliens nervous but had become the standard greeting in the new galactic order. "Excellent. Welcome to the Terran age of galactic civilization, Ambassador. Try not to make us regret our generosity." As the alien delegation filed out, their posture reflecting 6 months of learning hard lessons about human diplomacy, Jenny Walsh turned to her colleagues with satisfaction. "You know," she said, "I have to admit, I'm going to miss the old Galactic Council. They were such delightfully arrogant targets." "Don't worry," Morrison replied, watching the ships of the former Grand Armada departing Earth under human escort. "I'm sure we'll find new civilizations to educate about the benefits of not threatening humanity with extinction." Professor Grimsby looked up from his constitutional law textbooks with the expression of someone who'd found his true calling. "Actually, Admiral, our deep space scouts have identified several potential candidate species. Apparently, there's an entire sector that still believes in something called natural galactic hierarchy." Natural galactic hierarchy? The idea that some species are naturally meant to rule over others based on technological advancement or evolutionary development. Morrison smiled with the expression of someone who'd just been told Christmas was coming early. "Well, Professor, it sounds like we have some more teaching to do. Jenny, start drafting our introduction letters. Make sure to mention our educational philosophy, which is that the only natural hierarchy in the galaxy is the one between species smart enough to avoid making humanity angry and species that need to learn that lesson the hard way." And so the Terran Empire began its new role as the galaxy's most reluctant superpower, armed with superior firepower, unshakable confidence, and a diplomatic corps that could insult someone into surrender in 47 different languages. The Galactic Council's final ultimatum had indeed marked the end of an era. It just wasn't the era they'd expected to end.